Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Chitra Dwarka, and on behalf of the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association and the MIT Center for Digital Business, I'd like to welcome you to the CIO, CMO, CDO Perspectives on Digital Transformation. And please welcome Michael Krigsman, who is our moderator, and he'll be introducing our panel members. But just a quick bio on Michael. He is an analyst and strategy advisor to CIOs and IT leaders, and advises startups and enterprise vendors on innovation, marketing, and influencer strategies. He is a columnist also of ZDNet and has written over 1,000 articles on Wall Street journals, mentored in multiple media channels, and in 40 books at least. The one thing that's really cool about Michael, he has this side of CXO Talk that he speaks to speakers like our speaker panel today. And welcome, Michael. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chitra. This is going to be an amazing panel. We all know that the role of the CIO is changing substantially. And if you think about that role, CIOs are under a tremendous amount of pressure. For one thing, the CIO is very often asked to reduce cost, right? How can we get those costs down? And then, at the same time, the CIO is asked, innovate. How are you going to help us innovate? Drive innovation inside the company. And on the surface, at least, it appears that those goals are almost mutually exclusive. Today's panel is going to explore these various CIO pressures, and we're going to look at it through the lens of digital business and digital transformation, whatever that means, and hopefully we're going to find out as we go through this. So I'm going to briefly present the panelists and then ask each of them to describe their background in a little bit more detail. To my left is Thaddeus Arroyo, who is the CIO for AT&T. And Thaddeus, congratulations. You just won the MIT CIO Sloan Leadership Award.
Thank you.
Next to Thaddeus is Tanya Cordrey, who is the Chief Digital Officer for The Guardian. And Tanya, thank you so much for joining us on a one-night trip from London.
Wow. That's awesome.
And next to Tanya is Robert Tass, who is the Chief Marketing Officer, the CMO, for a company here in Boston, Pegasystems. Robert, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, George Westerman, who is a research scientist on, guess what, digital business here in Boston at MIT. So as we have this discussion, I invite you to participate anytime you want. There are microphones in both aisles. So if you have a question or you want to make a comment, please come up and go to the mic, and we'll invite you to join this conversation. To begin, let's start with George. Okay. George, you have been researching digital business transformation. You've done studies. You're working on a book that's about to be released on this topic. And I'm trying to figure out, what does digital business transformation mean? Because it seems when you talk with people, there's no standard definition, and they kind of make it up as they go, and everybody has their own convenient definition. So what are we talking about?
So it's great, you want a definition, you go to a professor, right? Because that's the first thing we do whenever we do a study. And we actually do have a definition here, digital transformation. We call it using technology to radically improve the performance or the reach of your business. And to break that apart, there's, performance and reach is one thing that's really important. And you got to think about, what do you mean by performance? What do you mean by reach? But the really important piece is the radical improvement piece. And the way I think about this is, if you think of your organization as a caterpillar, then digital should turn you into a butterfly. But unfortunately, across the companies that we've studied over the last couple of years, too many companies are not making digital butterflies. They're using digital just to become really fast caterpillars. And that's not going to get you there.
So in the study of caterpillars and butterflies, you've been talking with many large companies. What is the role of leadership?
So, we've identified this group of companies we call digital masters. And these digital masters all have a common approach to managing digital, and interestingly, they're 26% more profitable than their peers in the same industry. And what they do is they do two things. Number one, they do more digital stuff in customer experience, in operations, in business models. But even more importantly, they lead differently. For all the talk we've seen about, let 1,000 flowers bloom, let innovation happen around your organization, these leaders drive transformation top down. A technology for them is not a technology. It's a way to rethink how their business operates. And the only way to really make that happen is to create it and drive it from the top.
Tanya, tell us about your role as a Chief Digital Officer and what's going on in the media industry, and how does that connect with the leadership and the things that you do?
Okay. So my role, I'm part of the exec team at The Guardian, and I look after product engineering and data and analytics. In terms of what's going on in the media industry, it'd probably be quicker for me to tell you what's not going on, because absolutely everything is changing. We're seeing the way people access content is very different. We're seeing different forms of content consumption emerge. It's very different when you're looking for the headlines at 7:45 in the morning on your smartphone versus looking for context and analysis on your tablet late into the evening. We're seeing the way journalists produce content is very different. Now they need to be able to file stories on a smartphone from a war zone. We're seeing even the role of journalism change. So it's complete and utter disruption. And the competition has never been as fierce as it is today. We have competitors who are our traditional competitors, but we also have 1,001 startups and people like Google and Facebook who are really turning a lot of attention to the subject of news and putting a lot of money and effort behind trying to grow their audiences in that topic. In terms of leadership at The Guardian, my role is very much about making sure we have the digital capabilities first and foremost to really affect change. But also my role on the exec team is broader than the functional expertise that I represent, but it's also to sort of drive the organisation forward, to push them forward, to make sure we've got the momentum around change. So I'm meant to be that sort of little bit of grit in the oil, in the oyster at times, just to make sure that we never sort of lose our emphasis on moving forward and disrupting ourselves.
And Tanya, what's the relationship between this disruption and the changes that are happening in the media business and your role? What's the connection between that disruption and why your role was created?
Yeah, I think in many ways the way we approached it at The Guardian, I can only talk about The Guardian here, is the fact that our approach to digital transformation was in many ways dropping a pebble in a pond. And that pebble was the formation of my team. We were building out a world-class digital team that would not look out of place in a Google or a Facebook in Silicon Valley. And I think at the same time creating my role with my title, the position on the exec team, building out those disciplines was a very clear signal to the rest of the organisation that we were going to move forward. And we had a quick kind of critical mass of people to help drive that momentum. So it's sort of the effects of that rippled out across the organisation very, very quickly.
So your role, in a sense, is kind of the lightning rod for driving change in response to what was happening in the media business.
Yes, I'm often asked, is my role to represent digital at The Guardian? The truth is, we can't afford that to be the case. Everybody who works at The Guardian has to be digital. My job is just to make sure that it's always on the table, and everybody who can be digital is being as digital as they possibly can be. So it's sort of helping enable the organisation.
Now, Robert Tass, you are the Chief Marketing Officer for Pegasystems, and you also have a very strong background in digital. So tell us about your role, and tell us about the relationship between the digital focus that you've had and what you're doing now.
Sure. Pega is a enterprise technology company that sells and markets its technology to large Fortune 500 companies. And like most CMOs, I have a very strong mandate to help the company grow its revenue base and increase its awareness and manage our brand end to end. In that, my digital experience is probably one of the most paramount skills that I rely on, because like any business, the B2B or B2C, we're all using digital every day in every facet of our lives. And it's imperative for a company like Pega to embrace digital, not just in marketing, but through the entire customer journey. And prior to Pega, which I've only been in Pega about 2 months, I was at JP Chase, where I helped launch a digital center of excellence to kind of infuse that digital DNA into the business. And I rely on the things that I did a lot there in terms of using analytics across the company, using digital to drive collaboration, using digital to engage our customers in a lot more thoughtful way.
So at JP Morgan, you were using digital to drive change inside the business. And how about at Pega?
The same. I mean, like I said, I think that traditionally in the B2B world, people have this perception that it's obviously a one-to-one sale, and we have a lot of salespeople that make calls on large corporations. But digitizing our business from enabling that salesperson to the customer experience to communities that we're developing with our developer community, it's a necessity to make it an imperative for the entire company. And as someone who's responsible for the brand end to end, I act as that change agent in the company, I think.
So it's not just traditional marketing as it's always been done. There is
I was today, in fact, I was just going to say, I'm on the board of the Association of National Advertisers, which is the top 50 or so largest advertisers in the country. And someone said something really interesting, that the CMO's role today is like never before. They can't look backwards and say to their CEO anymore, remember how the other guy did it? Well, that doesn't apply anymore because of the rapid change in technology and social media and mobile and analytics and all these new skills and things that are coming into play. And those are all at that digital core of transforming every business.
Now, Thaddeus, finally, we come to the CIO on the panel. And Thaddeus, you keep winning all these awards and getting all these recognitions. And I'm not kidding, look up his bio, including the one here. And the common thread seems to be digital transformation. And yet you're the CIO, so how does that work?
Well, maybe a little bit more about the role I play, because it's evolved recently. But I'm responsible for all of AT&T's information technology and the underlying infrastructure. And in that role, I basically provide application systems across all of the AT&T's business segments. But in addition to that, I actually support all of the infrastructure, not only for our internal systems, but for our external customers. So think about that as the compute and storage fabric for the whole company, so that as I build technologies to run our systems, those become products and services we can instantiate in the marketplace. And more recently, we decided to bring our digital focus, frankly, and aggregate it to position ourselves to transform our digital perspective by 2020. And I'll talk a little more about that. But to do that, we brought what were basically digital organizations focused on each market segment that I still developed systems for. I was building the technology behind those experiences, but it was actually embedded within the sales and marketing organization to define those requirements that we would build systems around. But as we look toward where we really want to be in the years to come, and we want to advance that, and we already have immense digital intensity. So don't get me wrong, we have a very strong basis, but we want to drive to a position by 2020 where 80% of all of our interactions are digital. And to get to that point, even from the strong intensity that we have today, we had to take a more holistic approach in driving this transformation. And so late last year, we actually appointed our first corporate-wide chief digital officer, and she works for me as part of my organization, but is matrixed into each of the functional teams. But the difference in the approach of how we're approaching this digital transformation is that we want to create more shared platforms and assets as we create these capabilities rather than doing and aligning them on each segment. And importantly, we want to build these aspirational experiences that are best in class and make sure that those carry forward even in our products and services. So we go from, if you think about the digital experiences we serve today, as I brought this together and our chief digital officer was creating our experience team, we had 20 guides for user experiences across our company. We now have a single organization and center of excellence to go drive that and inform that experience. So that's just one of many examples. but I'm still aligned very tightly with the business in creating that. And so as I look at that, and I look at transformation and the opportunity, and it just happens to be aligned to me today, it wouldn't have changed if that chief digital officer was working for the CEO. We ultimately would approach this in the same way. And through my lens, and an interesting thing, and how I like to look at transformation in that context, is advances in technology led by powerful mobile computing, now connected to fast and ever-present networks, increasingly accessing these intelligent services in the cloud, are changing the way business does business. And it's not just to AT&T, it's frankly the services we provide to others. And as a result of that, I think what it's causing us to do, and I think causing many companies, is to really look differently at what our products and services are. I mentioned how we look at infrastructure now. You know, for us, it's going to be a product as much as it is a service that we consume. And it would be different if I was in a company that didn't provide that, in terms of I would probably likely just acquire and consume a service. But it also, though, has to transform our operations. And so as we look at that, we want to take these same digital technologies and not only inform the products that we have in the marketplace, but we want to use those to change the way we operate our business. And probably the top of all of this for us is ultimately then, as we connect and we tap into this fabric now of this connected and industrial internet, the connected and industrial consumer internet. In fact, if we look at tapping into those capabilities in this fabric together, we want to evolve our digital experiences. So not only do we want to ensure that we largely serve and meet our customers where they want to be met, but that ultimately we're delivering these aspirational experiences and frankly moving the entire company along the way, not just our digital properties. And so we think that these have to be connected. The only way we can provide a consistent experience across all these channels is to ensure we keep that in the forefront of our thinking, and to always think that we're organizing this around who we're serving, whether that's a business, enterprise, because we service in B2B and face-to-face channels and the digital capabilities we give our direct sellers, or if it's how we're serving our consumers directly. It's keeping those experiences connected.
So one of the key themes I think that have emerged from all of you is that digital business transformation affects the organization as a whole. And I think there's a tendency to think about digital as being primarily the realm of marketing, but clearly it's not. Do any of you want to hit that aspect of it, of the notion of digital business transformation being a change across the whole organization?
Maybe I'll start and hand it off, because I think it's interesting. I think digital is a team sport. And so no matter where it lives, I think this is something that a company has to embrace and ultimately undertake as a team. And so as we look at that, frankly, I think across every industry today, there's an important technology aspect to that. Even if it's in how you target an audience, our audiences are increasingly moving and ultimately transacting in a digital sphere. So how you tackle and how you hyper-target that audience is going to require certain technical capabilities, but it's the magic is ultimately as we bring the right teams together and engage in solving that problem together, I think that creates and puts you out on that digital edge. And then I look at that and defining that outcome, that you've successfully ultimately kind of blended the edge of your company into the experience.
And to add on that, I would say that when you're embarking on digital transformation, the people you hire have to be fantastic at working with other people. Mm-hmm. So there's no point having brilliant functional expertise, you know, the best software developer, the whatever, because actually if they're not going to help spread the digital message and basically work very hard at embracing change and bringing others along with you, then you're never going to get as far as you possibly can.
I think one thing I was going to say is that I think what you said is an aspirational statement. Mm-hmm. I think we're very early in this journey.
Yeah,
and I think that many companies have gone out and created some digital silos, and I think they're now trying to reel them back in. And I think that's going to be where the businesses do need to get involved and get united on really being what I call sort of digital by design. And that's a big shift for companies to take, especially older companies that have been doing something a certain way, and you have these newer companies that are agile and moving a lot faster. I think that you need to top down, as you said. I think you need a C-suite that is very united of that mission and challenge, because I think it really puts the customer at the center. And I know we've talked about customer centricity for a long time, but I think it really today, through the use of these digital technologies, you almost don't have a choice anymore, and that mandate is now there. So, but everybody from the front line, marketing, sales function, all the way through to service and delivery, and as a CMO, I talk about delivering that brand promise, boy, it's a bad promise when that digital button doesn't work, or you don't get what you want immediately, or something breaks in there. So you need the whole company rallying around that and really being able to embrace that. But that requires a lot of steps to come through, and I think we're still early in the process.
And I would add to that, from the opportunity standpoint, there are tremendous opportunities not only in marketing, but in changing the way your field service operates. Or there's a company in Chile, Codelco, is imagining a mining operation where nobody ever needs to go underground again.
Wow.
Which is really cool.
That's cool.
But the other thing that's really important here is the best customer experiences are all driven by a tremendously amazing internal digital platform.
So
And
technology.
You know, if yours, well, the way Caesars works with their customers, the way AT&T works with their customers, the way Burberry does with theirs, it starts by having the data, the platform in really good shape. And marketing can do great things with customer experience, but somebody's got to put that platform in place first.
Boy, now I'm confused because the consensus just was that we have these silos and that one of the key dimensions of successfully making this admittedly aspirational change is getting people to work together across the silos. And now you're saying that it's all about the technology. So I'm confused. Is it about the people or about the tech?
Well, see, now you're being a journalist with me, right? So
Well, I'm not a journalist, I'm an analyst, but
no,
it's an innocent question.
Right. No, actually, no, I'm just pushing back on you a little bit. No, it's not all about the technology. But if you put the technology in place, you can do great things. And if you don't have the technology in place, it's harder to do those great things. And so the technology becomes almost an enabling capability that everybody else can build from.
I think I would add that saying, I think if you look at the evolution of technology, I'm sure others can speak better at it, but as I think about it is that we've grown up and evolved into buying these point solutions. I'm the head of sales, I bought SFA. I'm the head of customer service, I bought that. I bought my new website, I'm the marketing guy. And no longer can you make those decisions by yourself, for you. They now have impact across the entire organization. My website, your AT&T's website now handles not only my phone, my cable, my customer service, my new orders, my accessories, all those things, 5, 10 years ago probably weren't in the design process, but today we now not all need to collaborate and work together as we unify these systems, because I don't think there's one platform. I think there could be at some point, but I think there's a lot of investment in infrastructure that we have to leverage and reuse and take the best out of and connect. But you need collaboration with the business on that very, very much up front.
Okay, Thaddeus. So it's about collaboration and it's also about technology. How do these fit together?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is really in approaching and crossing these silos that were articulated, and it's really how you bring that technology forward in the form of experiences. And importantly, it's not as though that you have to even unite all the underlying technologies to deliver this. The collaboration is really about understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And then the ultimate technology delivery and the experience element is about exposing the technology in a way that we can deliver experiences digitally. And an important part to, and I think it goes back to what George was saying here, and interestingly enough, as we created these digital silos of the past, we were exposing capabilities, and this is many companies, to our customers that frankly were giving them more effortless experiences than our physical channels. Our physical channels were using tools that were a decade older and frankly had never delivered that same DNA. And the DNA we like to look at is simple, empowered, and immediate. And we were delivering that simple, empowered, and immediate experience in a digital channel, but not in a physical. And so ultimately, as I look at that collaboration and where those come together, as we define those experiences, we may deliver those ultimately digitally and now interconnect them, but our approach is now is not necessarily replacing all the underlying infrastructure at the outset, but is to envision what we want to solve, building that experience and connecting to the legacy, and then we'll sweep behind it in the past and ultimately continue to evolve and transform the back-end technology that's underlying, but it allows us to focus on delivering that experience now and connecting many of these silos, and from a transformation perspective, allows us to approach problems in new ways and finally start to use, even in the tools we give our physical channels and our employees, give them those same digital capabilities. We've done that, like just a simple example, in our retail stores. If you go to a retail store now, you'll be standing side by side with someone using a tablet, and we had to design that with the mindset that the customer's probably going to be looking over your shoulder. But it's going to have the insight. It's going to unite all these disparate assets in real time to give you the same information that our customer would have ultimately probably been able to experience going directly to us.
All three of you are nodding your heads. So Tanya, you're in a business that has been changing dramatically.
Yes.
Moving from print. So what's going on with print? What's going on with online and this connection with technology and the stuff that your company does? And what does your company actually do now? Are you a technology company or you a group of writers like in the old days?
So, I mean, journalism is still our bread and butter, and that's at the heart of what we do. But Dick Costolo, who's the CEO of Twitter, he's referred to Twitter as a tech company that does news. We like to say we're a news company that does tech. So we haven't shied away from the tech. You've talked about the people and you talked about the technology. I think there's a third thing to throw in the equation, and I think it's about courage. So I think what I'm very fortunate working at someone like The Guardian, because The Guardian is a courageous organisation. It was born 200 years ago, well, basically 190 odd some years ago, and it was born out of a sort of an act where some people wanted to courageously expose something that they felt was very unjust and needed exposing. And The Guardian is still doing that today. It's born in our DNA. But what's really exciting about that is that courage is infectious. And I think anybody who's driving change in their organisation, you should really bear that in mind, because it's been fascinating to see how infectious courage is. So in The Guardian, we have the journalism, which is very courageous. You only had to look at the work done with the sort of the Edward Snowden story, etc. But it means that the organisation itself will take huge leap forwards for digital transformation that I think many others would shy away from. An example I would use is last year. The Guardian website was on a domain, guardian.co.uk. And we took the decision because out of our 100 million unique browsers we get every month, only only a third of those are from the UK. 2/3 of our audience are now global. So we found that having a .co.uk domain wasn't really working. And put bluntly, when we're expanding in the US advertisers do not want to advertise on a .co.uk, even though we tell them that the technology will ensure that it's only US visitors that will see it. So we took the decision to change the domain move. It sounds like a very small thing to do, but my goodness me, it's a sort of an incredibly hard technical challenge to do that. And the risks of getting it wrong are immense for the business. But the interesting thing is the organisation wanted to be courageous. We've been told privately that it was probably one of the largest, if not the largest, domain move in the history of the web. Because of the size, etc. But the thing is that by doing that, everybody gets very enthused and excited by transformation. They want to take that great leap forward. They want to support their colleagues. And that sort of courageousness really helps drive things forward.
So in your case, as George said, the technology is the enabler or the platform, and then the business and organizational changes are happening around that.
Yeah. Another observation, this is going to sound a very strange thing, but one of the things I've learned doing my role is there are times that, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody in this room, there are times when the technology doesn't work and something you kind of, but do you know what? I've come to really embrace those times, because actually when things don't work, that's the moment that your teams get to shine by fixing it. And I've really changed my attitude, because I think when I started my job and something went wrong, and hell, things go wrong fairly regularly, you start thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. But actually, the thing is, it is terrible, and you know you're going to sort it. But the way you communicate and the way you basically allow the rest of the business to really see what a fantastic job you're doing, what fantastic people you're leading, those are actually huge opportunities when they, unfortunately, present themselves.
Well, I haven't heard too many CIOs talk about downtime in that kind of aspirational way. But you're a glass half full kind of person.
No, but I think the thing is, I'm not trying to be kind of flippant or foolishly optimistic here. It's just in those times of tremendous pressure, that's when you show your mettle. And actually, if you have a team that just quietly gets on it and fixes it and then celebrates its success, I think too often of those of us who work in technology, things happen and we don't actually pause to tell people what we've done and what a great job has been done by the teams to achieve that. These are moments you have to kind of take a bit of silver lining from the cloud.
Fair enough. Now, Robert, the relationship between IT and marketing is an interesting one and sometimes fraught with difficulty because marketing, as the use of technology and data and analytics grows within marketing, it seems like the marketing budget is increasing.
From your mouth to God's ears.
But we have a group of CIOs here who might see it as being a zero-sum game, where their budget is sort of shifting towards you. So,
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on this? And then let's toss out the question to the other panelists about whether this is a zero-sum game in the first place. But so, any thoughts from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, and obviously that point of view was a nice provocative piece that was issued a little while ago. And as much as I would love to think that my budget is going to increase dramatically, as I tell everybody, I absolutely think that my budget and Pega's budget around the customer is going to increase. The necessity to use technology to drive our business is going to increase and is increasing to do things more digitally, better, faster, and improve that experience. I don't buy into the fact that the CMO is going to have a bigger budget than IT. I buy in that we need to be collaborative partners and that they have skills that I will never have and never want to have. And we talk about uptime and things like that. I've been through my own experiences of bad stories where, people have done things that they shouldn't have done without IT and bad things happen. And the CIO is a critical piece to the customer experience and running the backbone and providing the infrastructure and helping marketing gather that data, gather the assets, create the workflow tools and things to make us collaborate across the organization. As I said earlier, the data is no longer just marketing data. It is company data, it's customer data. And my CIO partner and I, who I talk to very regularly, and we share many sessions together about how we aggregate and collaborate to get that information, not just into my teams, into the product team, into the finance team, into the sales team, and so forth. And I think we are a catalyst, because I think we're some of the newer perspectives around customer and data and things like that, and being the interface maybe sometimes. But I have a very strong opinion that my IT brethren is a key partner in my success.
Thaddeus?
I like
If I may, just a small question about what you mentioned right now.
Certainly.
Isn't it a situation currently of do and die or die? Because maybe you have to spend more budget for the future, otherwise your company won't be in the digital era competitive. So is it?
I absolutely agree with that there is an imperative today for any company, not the CMO to spend more money now, but
Yeah, of course.
for any company to invest in digital and be a leader and view this as a very urgent call. I mean, the world is changing so fast. I mean, things are happening in the technology and the fragmentation of choice and what power consumers have. I mean, CMOs, CIOs, CEOs have never seen anything like it, and they better be acting fast.
But to all of you, is your management, in your case, specific cases, flexible in this direction, understanding that without some more spending in this area,
Unequivocally. For me.
Yeah.
No, same here.
We wouldn't be
agree.
sitting up here, I don't think, if that wasn't
I
the
agree.
case.
And the perspective I was going to add is just that I think I like to look at every budget as a digital budget. Forget about ultimately where it's being spent. And I say that because if you look at this, whether you're using digital technologies to enhance the bottom line of the company, you're enhancing, it may not be coming out of the IT organization or the digital organization as it relates to cost. You're likely adding cost there on a perpetual basis. But if you're adding 10 cents of cost and removing $1 of fixed cost, then that's obviously a good investment. So in that respect, everything's a digital budget. But the other element, too, is as you're using digital technologies to enhance the top line, and insofar as you can prove out those economics, you can afford then to drive incremental investment, right? If you have the top line that follows it to that point that was just asked. And to a certain degree, as you make those cases, I think, and you're facing disruption in your industry, many of your technology budgets will continue to grow as long as you can prove that business value in this. But I think you have to look at this holistically. You have to partner, just as I have to partner, by example, to get marketing dollars directed towards digital properties. You know, with my responsibility of the digital channels, I need eyeballs. And we need to show the efficacy of targeting, whether it's display or search advertising in those channels through hyper-targeted advertising, and the efficacy maybe of spending a little more per impression. But as long as we can prove that we have the efficacy of the whether it's delivering a service or the incremental ad, then I think that's how you make that case together, and you look at that budget holistically.
And I just add really quick to that is that it is no longer just looking at the search budget. Right. It's looking at television and its impact on search and its impact on the call center and its impact across that omni-channel experience. That's all digital. Yep. And that's the beauty of all this is that those are the unifying forces that are bringing us together and creating that imperative.
Absolutely. So if I can just add to this a little bit about the idea of, who owns the budgets. The great CIOs that I've seen in just years of research they do something different. They don't talk about the IT budget and your budget. The great CIOs are not only about spending IT money well, they're about helping the business spend their own money well. And I think that kind of builds on some things that you were talking about there, Thaddeus, about what can we, rather than fixing technology, what can we do to change your processes and help you be a better business by investing in technology?
So you're saying it's not a zero-sum game, but there's not a fixed pot of money, and it's going to be divided between IT and, say, marketing or other departments regarding technology.
Actually, what we see is that the better you get at managing technology, the more appetite the organization develops for spending, because they get more return every time you spend money.
But then why do so many CIOs feel that they're under attack, under siege, because their budgets are shrinking and they're just under so much pressure from a budget standpoint?
So go ahead.
Well, I think to a certain degree, I think that pressure remains, and I'll look at my organization, and it's a multi-billion-dollar budget when you look at expense as well as investment. So to ultimately create the capacity to make the incremental investments that we need to make, frankly, to deliver these digital capabilities, we do have to continue to improve the efficiency of operating IT. And so we apply some of the same principles. I like to look at it as the same digital principles to how we develop our software, to how we support our systems. We make investments to improve the ongoing efficiency so that we can ultimately create capacity to increase investments. While it may not be a zero-sum game, unless you're proving that you're truly going to impact that top line, the investment obviously may be, right, until you can truly prove that you can make a case for incremental investing. As it relates to a zero-sum game, it can be, frankly, it doesn't have to be even zero-sum when I mentioned the benefits that you can provide to parts of the business, but I think we have to be part of that. We have to make sure that we're committed on an ongoing basis to continue to improve the efficacy and efficiency in terms of what we deliver and what we invest in ourselves.
So you're looking to drive efficiency in your IT spend, and at the same time, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but at the same time, figure out ways in which your organization, as George was saying, can provide some type of meaningful benefit to other parts of the company.
Absolutely, and in fact, we measure that in two dimensions. We measure the productivity on new incremental investment. So we have to prove efficiency in every new dollar that we invest, and that we're producing that output for less dollars, if you will. And at the same thing, we're improving the efficiency of operating the legacy that we've had. And so you're tackling that in both directions, and you're creating capacity for the business to invest. So we have to put as much pressure on ourselves in transforming ourselves, tapping into the latest as it relates to digital capabilities for how we develop, how we build platforms so that we drive maximum reuse. And frankly, we reduce our costs for subsequent development by 50% when I do that the right way.
Mm-hmm. So George, you're nodding.
Oh, yeah.
So why are you nodding?
Well, okay, so think about it this way, right? Let's say you spend 5-10% of revenue on IT. That means that you cut that in half, you're saving yourself 2-5% of the company. Well, there's another 90% sitting out there waiting to be done, to have something done with it. And I think what we're hearing here is a lot of that. Is, if IT can spend a little bit of money to make the rest of the business better, that's a really good investment.
But I think there's a challenge in that this move. So we talked about the space moving so fast, and our traditional IT organizations have been primarily focused on the back office, and now we're making them focus on the front office, and even combining them. And you know, skill sets are just hard, man. It's hard to find analytics people and social people and things like that, and UI people that can be proliferated at scale. And I think that's why you're hearing the pressure from some of the CIOs and even CMOs or C people at all places, is that it's just hard to find and engage that talent. And I used that word earlier, digital by design, and that's just not one person. That's something that's got to get into the DNA. That's the product guy to the retail store to the technology person, and it's hard to find. It's new. You don't have someone with 10 years or 15 years of social media experience or UX design on a mobile device, because it didn't exist. And that's the pressure of speed and skill gap and saying, why aren't we doing it faster? And I don't envy that. I mean, that's hard. That's a hard challenge for all of us.
And I think that's that's providing huge pressure on things like budgets.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're finding there are some areas of skills where, frankly, there are people who know that it doesn't make any sense for them to take a permanent job. So if you take sort of iOS or Android developers at the moment, very large swathes of people in that sector who are phenomenally good will work as contractors because that is financially far more rewarding for them. It's challenging because we're having to work with people in a different way than we've done before. But as you say, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face in the years ahead about having all the skills, because we're all competing for a very small pool of great people.
But aren't these skill sets changing? Because you're talking about the competition for these new skill sets, but at the same time as organizations migrate to the cloud, there are IT jobs like database administrators that are becoming less in demand. How do you...
I think there's a large skill set shift, and we all have to manage through that. So, you know, we look out multiple years to make sure that we're building the capabilities that we need in 2020 by mapping out where we're starting from today. But if you look at just the mapping of my organization, which is in the tens of thousands of resources and IT professionals, ultimately, and we look at where they're going to be in 2020, think about all the Unix administrators. That will no longer be a relevant skill, but we need Linux administrators in the cloud. Think about developers from, you know, ultimately being, you know, traditional developers to now software orchestrators. And frankly, when we look at this across all our roles, we're broadening the scope of every individual IT professional, but we're reducing our roles by 2/3 at the same time. So they're broader roles, they're deeper roles, and they're all pivoting to new skill sets. And over the next 5 years, 90% of all of our professionals will have to evolve and develop those new skills.
So you're thinking very strategically about the skill set shift over time.
Yeah, it's not going to happen naturally. I think we need to ultimately define that mapping.
Great. And we have a question. I'm glad there are a few questions at least. You have this incredible group of people, and you have them for another almost 20 minutes. So ask questions. Sir?
Okay. Got a question for Robert. When you were at JP, you had this big institutional business on one hand, and then you had the retail business there as well. Is there a difference in the way that you would think about the opportunities or the way that you would deliver these digital capabilities to the institutional side of the business versus the individual or the retail side? And then just more generally for the panel, is there a difference in the way that you think about delivering what you do in a B2B context versus a B2C?
I mean, the answer is yes. Obviously, the wholesale business is like more B2B to your question, and the consumer business, we had a different scale and a set of requirements. We did have some ability to share some services that we could transfer across the board, so we certainly tried to do that just to be efficient. But like, you know, for example, the wholesale side, we focused a lot more on mobile as an experience in that one-to-one relationship. On the consumer side, we were probably more heavy on the data side and really trying to gain advantages that way. But, you know, like any business, there's different businesses, and you have to apply digital to meet their business objectives the right way.
Yeah, I'll add to that because I think it's interesting and it's a good question because you know, we thought about this long and hard as we kind of look towards our long-term digital vision. And it's interesting because as we found more commonality than differences as we look at how we serve the business market. Think of what we sell to small, medium, and large businesses as well as, I mean, there's a natural and an obvious inclination to all of us to understand serving consumers. The digital experience is going to be important, and right now I can mention our digital customers, our consumers, 76% prefer digital experiences as a way to interact. But interestingly enough, it's not different in the business. While we may have faced off against those markets historically with face-to-face sellers, as we look at, once we establish that relationship, how they want to interact with us, they want to interact with us in ways that are efficient and appropriate for their business. In some cases, it's going to be directly through our digital extensions, our online ability, and the majority remains mobile. But interestingly enough, we had to think even bigger than that, because the way we serve businesses, they want to consume some of our digital capabilities, not in the form of an online site, but just through simple-to-use application interfaces that they can build directly into their digital experiences. And so for us, it meant looking at our capabilities and not just exposing them digitally in what you can consume online or what you can consume in a mobile experience, but it's through our developer portal, the way you can come and consume any of our digital services as at the micro level of an application interface, and then build your own experiences around that. So frankly, if anything, it's requiring us to go deeper digitally.
Great. Question on this side?
Yeah. You've talked a lot about, your last answer was just on experiences, and we talked about the importance of designing digital experiences and the convergence of marketing and IT. I'm wondering to what extent you've developed new and different metrics for this, because one of the things I've observed, in keeping with the dysfunctional things that I've observed, organizations try to use NPS as their convergent. So we're keeping our existing metric, but
NPS is Net Promoter Score for people who don't know.
But we're keeping we're creating a unified, quote, digital experience. So I'd like to know, what kind of new metrics are you dealing with to assess the effectiveness of how well you integrate and serve digitally experienced design for customers?
And can I direct that to each one of you? Because I think that's the question of metrics and what are we actually measuring and what are we looking at is a really interesting question. Thank you for asking that, and we'll come back to you in a bit.
I'll happy to start, because we've looked at this in multiple dimensions, and we still continue to look at, I think an important one, and it's still helpful for us, is to look at the Net Promoter Score, and as it relates to at least how they're rating the experience. But we have, we look at every interaction as having the potential to be a digital interaction. So one of the big metrics that we look at today is, very simply put, and we have very clear economics that we can put around there, is we measure every interaction that takes place in our company, whether it's through a physical channel or whether it's a change made digitally. And we're importantly here is that we do separate a digital change from just a browse experience.
What do you mean by a change? I'm sorry for interrupting.
A change, meaning somebody comes in, they pay a bill with us, they make a change to their account. They would have, if they didn't engage with us digitally, they would have had to come into a retail store or call us, right? And so we've kept that metric, and it's a very discrete metric. We look at every interaction across every channel, and then we look at all the ones that we're serving digitally today.
And you're running analytics over that.
Absolutely, and we're measuring that. We're measuring that real time. And so the interesting part is we have a very good measure to look at what percentage of the interactions that we're handling across the business that we're serving digitally versus and so an interesting thing is, while we don't count a digital interaction where somebody might have just looked something up, and we do count a physical interaction where someone just called us and asked a question, it's really just forcing us to push the edge on delivering better experiences to drive people to those preferential channels. But we still continue to look at satisfaction. We look at the other element, I'd say, is we look at other dimensions in terms of research around the usability of our digital experiences. And so that's another dimension that's important, particularly now, is we try to build the experiences for tomorrow. And a big important element for us in that design is speed is now becoming an important element of our design. I think, I'm not sure, I don't recall the source, but it was an article I read recently that was talking about, for every second that you add in a digital experience, you lose 7% chance to convert. And so speed is an important element of that design. And so we bring that in, so we measure speed as part of that experience as well.
Latency is not
Absolutely.
on your KPI.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a whole range of these new metrics that you're looking at that are very tailored to your business as it is now.
But I think they would apply to any digital business, right?
Sure.
So you think about speed as an element of, and latency in this case of that interaction, the satisfaction of that interaction, but the more interesting thing is measuring just discrete interactions that took place and asking yourself the question, why didn't they occur digitally?
Okay. Tanya, what's important in your business, and what do you measure?
So we measure everything, and therein lies some of the problem, because the truth is there's too much choice in what to measure. But we have really tried to hone it down. There's been an interesting shift. I think if you were to look 2-3 years ago, people working in a sort of similar field to myself, a lot of publishers, so they'd talk about total number of uniques. In fact, I referenced only earlier the Guardian's 100 million unique browsers. But we realized that internally that actually a top-line figure is pretty meaningless. It's great in terms of our ability to acquire users, maybe rather fleetingly, but there's a real shift, and we're seeing the whole industry shift around engagement. So
Engagement rather than vanity metrics.
yes, and frequency. So I think it's a topic that really obsesses us at the moment, and so the shift for us has really been, as I say, about looking at, if people really like us, they will come back more often, because actually the news is ever shifting. We have a product that changes every few seconds. So the truth is that if we are really to play a part in somebody's sort of life, their daily habits of content consumption, they should come to us frequently. So the metric, it's very hard to sort of, I could talk about lots of metrics, but the one that's dear to my heart at the moment is sort of our daily active users as a percentage of our monthly active users. And we're trying to drive up the sort of the engagement with people to come back more often. Now, under that is a whole host of other metrics that feeds into that top line figure. Speed also is one that we're very obsessive about. There was actually a report just published in the UK where it measured lots and lots of news sites, and we were the first, and that was we're the fastest site, and we have spent a lot of time re-architecting our products so that they're super fast, because we believe to get people to come back, you need to have a fast site, because put bluntly, if you're there on a Saturday afternoon and you're trying to get the football score, if it's late, then it's no good to anybody.
So Robert, we have customer changes as being a primary metric. We have customer engagement. How about for your business? What do you care about? What do you look at?
What they said.
What they said, okay.
I was trying to think about it, and I know it sounds really good. I don't know that there are that many new metrics in the way that maybe we want it to be. I think as for our business, again, we're in the B2B business, so we're very, customer and revenue driven. I think the things I would say is that what we now have the luxury of or the pleasure of is to navigate all these new inputs into that process. So we can now track a lot more thoroughly, not only when you meet with somebody from Pega, but you come to our website and do you interact with content, and do you like that content? And much like you're in the news business, do they come back again? And do they then come to an event of ours, and do we track that and things like that? So we now have, I think, these data points that we get to improve into our planning process, which used to be probably annual for many companies, and then maybe went to 6 months. Now it's almost daily. And I think that because we have this real-time data, that we can make far better decisions of what we do and how we communicate and how we engage. And I think that's changed the process and changed how we operate.
Now, George, you've been studying lots of companies, so can you make generalizations about digital metrics and this topic?
I think one of the things we're hearing here, and one of the things that we've seen in the research on CIOs and also on digital, is that you have those top-line metrics, NPS, profit. They're great, but it's really hard to see how anything you did moved the dial on those numbers. And so one of the things we're hearing here and in other places is you take that next level down. These things, they move the dial somehow, but we can really focus to that next level of metric, and that's where we can start to see, did this change really work?
So you can create a tighter correlation between the investment of dollars or the activities that you're taking and the downstream result.
So one of my favorite companies these days is Caesars. And their CEO is a graduate of MIT, so we're very proud of him. And one of the things he does in terms of...
Pizza guy or gambling guy?
What's that?
Pizza or gambling?
Oh, sorry, gambling. Sorry. Actually, I'm not allowed to call it gambling. We have to call it gaming.
Gaming.
Right.
Entertainment.
But one of the things that Gary Loveman does that's really interesting is everything is driven by experimentation and by analytics in the organization. And he says there's only 3 ways to get fired from Caesars. One is to steal money. One is to harass an employee. And the third way is to conduct an experiment without a control group. And so they're always saying everything they do, how are we driving a metric? And how are we improving on everything they do?
Isn't that a big cultural shift, though, right?
Huge cultural shift for them, yeah. And also they had to bring a whole lot of analytics skills in to make that work.
So that means that if you have kids in high school, data scientists.
Clearly.
Data science is the place to be. And I'm sorry, you've been waiting very patiently to ask a question.
That's okay. And actually, your last question answered a lot of mine. You clearly, by those metrics, are showing how you're integrating the marketing with all the information technology. But I've talked to some companies who have now put the CMO position underneath the CIO position. So instead of competing for that revenue, you're controlling that revenue. And I wonder if you see that as a trend throughout things. Then I have one comment. I hate NPS. If I get 5 more every week, every time I talk to anybody or buy anything, somebody asks me if I will recommend them. What do you think I talk about with my friends? Oh, I had a great customer service experience.
So we have.
So I vote 5 for everyone.
So we
her
have
off the
4
list.
minutes left. Just on that, very quickly, Motorola Solutions has a gentleman by the name of Eduardo Condrado who owns both IT and marketing. So if you're interested in that coming together, look at Motorola Solutions. But we have to sort of drive to the end. This could go on for another hour easily. But we're not going to. We're going to go on for another 3 minutes. So can each of the panelists, and maybe we'll start with George this time, come down this side, 2 or 3 quick pieces of practical advice for the audience, no more than half a sentence for each one. So tweetable comments.
All right, so first of all, on the technology side, don't think of it as technology. Think of it as an opportunity to transform. Number 2 is these things really do need to be led top-down with a vision and some guidance and some governance to make it happen. And third, if you're an IT person and you want to be part of this conversation, don't wait. Just jump into the conversation and see what happens.
Great, Robert.
I think that the first thing that popped into my head is that we have such an amazing opportunity to put our customer in the center of the universe and use them as a catalyst to change and transform our companies. It's the best currency. You can't argue with the customer. And if you do that, I think the C-suite, the entire functional team, can't not rally around that. And I think this is the opportunity to do that.
Great, and Tanya?
So I'd say be bold. Keep moving forward. If you can't measure it, don't do it, because there's no point if you can't understand and communicate your success. And also, there's always this sort of narrative of our CEOs kind of falling under the CMOs or kind of inheriting other things or budgets. I think you are your own narrative. So for everybody out there who's feeling a little anxious with the change, just remember the narrative you say is the narrative that sort of defines you in the organization. So if you're talking about costs and procurement, that's the bucket you stay in. If you're talking about growth and innovation and digital transformation, that's the light by which you're casting yourself in.
And Thaddeus, you're the only CIO in the panel in an audience filled with CIOs. So as a CIO, from CIO to CIO.
Yeah, so to me, one of the most important things, and I ask all my leaders to start with this, is as we approach solving any problem, and that is asking the question, is if I was starting from scratch, how would we define this solution? What would that experience be? So this transformational versus evolutional approach, I think, yields much higher outcomes. And ultimately, in many cases, find that we can ultimately achieve that in terms of without doing a full greenfield approach. The other one, though, is defining for the organization and setting the stage that if we're not changing as fast as the marketplace around us, that we're going to be left behind. And that's an important thing to understand, because if you're running a large technology organization today, beyond delivering some of these transformational opportunities, we have a substantial amount of change that we have to continue to lead. And we need to really take time so that our team members understand why we're going through this change. And frankly, if you're part of an organization that's not rapidly changed, I'd be more concerned than one dealing with the stress of ultimately trying to transform a company. And I think the final element is to not let your own belief, because I have caught myself doing this from time and time again, but not let your own beliefs or what you think is possible limit what your organization things as possible. I have been proven so many times, where my initial mindset, what I've learned now is to at least be quiet and let them go attempt it first. But I've learned too many other times when they prove me wrong that I stopped at least trying to make them prove me wrong and let them kind of tap into the full potential of the organization.
Wow, amazing advice. So what an incredible panel this has been. And I'd like to thank Chitra Dwarka, who is the panel captain, without whom there would have been no panel. And of course, our guests, Thaddeus Arroyo, who is the CIO of AT&T, Robert Tass, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Pegasystems, and Tanya Cordrey, who is the Chief Digital Officer of the Guardian News and Media, and George Westerman, who is a research scientist here at MIT. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the panelists, and we have a token of our appreciation for their valuable insight. Thank you so much.